Welcome to the Rainy Night Storyteller. In this quiet space, where the rain whispers like secrets in the dark, I will guide you through chilling tales of mystery and horror. Turn off the lights, settle into your favorite spot, and let the soothing sound of the rain carry you into a world of the unknown. Before we dive into tonight's story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps keep the rain falling and the stories coming. Are you ready? Let's begin the tale. The mansion loomed before me, a behemoth of stone and shadow against the fading twilight. As I fumbled with the keys, a chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the crisp autumn air. I told myself it was just nerves. After all, it's not every day you get asked to house-sit a sprawling estate that looks like it jumped straight out of a Gothic novel. I pushed open the heavy oak door, wincing at the loud creak that echoed through the cavernous entryway. "Hello?" I called out, my voice small in the vastness. Silence answered me, broken only by the ticking of an antique grandfather clock. "Get it together, Sarah," I chided myself. "You're alone here, just like Mrs. Blackwood said you'd be. No need to jump at shadows." I lugged my suitcase up the grand staircase, my footsteps muffled by the plush carpet. The bedroom Mrs. Blackwood had directed me to was larger than my entire apartment, with a four-poster bed that could easily sleep four. I unpacked quickly, eager to explore the rest of the house before it got too dark. Room after room revealed itself to me, each more opulent than the last. A library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a music room with a grand piano gathering dust, a sunroom filled with exotic plants I couldn't name. It was like stepping into another world, one of old money and faded glamour. As night fell, I retreated to the kitchen to make dinner. The modern appliances stood out starkly against the vintage decor, a jarring reminder of the present day. I ate my pasta in silence, the scrape of my fork against the plate uncomfortably loud. That first night, I slept fitfully. The house creaked and groaned around me, settling in ways my city apartment never did. Every noise had me sitting bolt upright, heart racing, before I remembered where I was. By the time dawn broke, I felt more exhausted than when I'd gone to bed. The next day passed uneventfully. I worked remotely from the library, the Wi-Fi surprisingly good for such an old house. As evening approached, I decided to run myself a bath in the clawfoot tub, hoping it would help me relax. I was just sinking into the steaming water when I heard it, a thud, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps. My blood ran cold. I held my breath, straining to listen. There it was again, the slow, deliberate tread of someone trying to move quietly. "It's just the house settling," I told myself, "or your imagination running wild." But deep down, I knew better. With shaking hands, I got out of the tub and dressed quickly. I crept to the bathroom door and pressed my ear against it. The footsteps had stopped, but now I could hear something else, the sound of drawers opening and closing. Someone was in the house, searching for something. Panic clawed at my throat. My phone was in the bedroom. The landline was downstairs. I was trapped. Think, Sarah, think. I looked around the bathroom, desperate for anything I could use as a weapon. My eyes fell on a heavy crystal soap dish. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Taking a deep breath, I eased the bathroom door open. The hallway was empty, but I could hear movement coming from one of the spare bedrooms. As quietly as I could, I crept toward the stairs. I had just reached the top of the staircase when a floorboard creaked beneath my foot. The noise from the bedroom stopped abruptly. Heart pounding, I flew down the stairs, taking them two at a time. Heavy footsteps thundered behind me, giving chase. I ran for the front door, only to find it locked. In my panic, I couldn't remember which key was which. A hand grabbed my shoulder, spinning me around. I lashed out blindly with the soap dish, feeling it connect with something solid. There was a grunt of pain, and the grip on my shoulder loosened. I didn't wait to see who my attacker was. I ran for the kitchen, thinking of the back door. Behind me, I could hear the intruder recovering, their footsteps pounding after me. The kitchen was dark, lit only by the faint glow of the microwave clock. I stumbled through it, hands outstretched, searching for the door. My hips slammed into the kitchen island, and I bit back a curse of pain. Where was the damn door? My fingers brushed against cool glass. The door. I fumbled for the handle, my sweaty hands slipping on the smooth metal. Got it. I yanked the door open and burst out into the cool night air. The vast manicured lawn stretched out before me, the trees at its edge a dark, forbidding wall. I ran toward them, the damp grass soaking through my socks. I had just reached the tree line when I heard the back door slam open. "Stop!" a deep voice bellowed. The sound spurred me on, pushing me deeper into the woods. Branches whipped at my face as I ran, roots threatening to trip me with every step. I had no idea where I was going. No plan beyond get away, get help. I don't know how long I ran. It could have been minutes or hours. My lungs burned, and my legs felt like lead, but fear kept me going. The certainty that if I stopped, something terrible would happen. Finally, when I felt I couldn't take another step, I saw lights through the trees. A house. I stumbled toward it, relief making me dizzy. As I broke through the tree line, I realized with a start that I recognized this house. It was the mansion. Somehow, in my blind panic, I had run in a circle. For a moment, I stood frozen, unsure what to do. Then I saw a car in the driveway that hadn't been there before. A police car. Safety. I ran toward it, waving my arms. "Help!" I screamed. "Please help me." The front door of the mansion opened, and a police officer stepped out, followed by Mrs. Blackwood. "Oh, thank God," Mrs. Blackwood said, rushing toward me. "Sarah, dear, are you all right? We've been so worried." I stared at her, uncomprehending. "There's someone in the house," I managed to gasp. "An intruder. He chased me." Mrs. Blackwood and the officer exchanged a look. "Sarah," Mrs. Blackwood said gently, "there's no intruder. It's just Harold." As if summoned by his name, a man appeared in the doorway. He was tall and lean, with graying hair and a kindly face. There was a bruise forming on his cheek. "I'm so sorry for frightening you," he said, his voice deep and apologetic. The same voice that had shouted after me in the woods. I should have announced myself. "Sarah, this is my husband, Harold," Mrs. Blackwood explained. "He wasn't supposed to be back until next week, but his business trip ended early. He came home to surprise me, not realizing I had asked you to house sit. The adrenaline that had been keeping me going suddenly evaporated, leaving me drained. But the noises, the searching..." Harold looked sheepish. "I was looking for my reading glasses. I didn't want to wake you, so I was trying to be quiet. When I heard you run, I tried to explain, but..." He gestured to his bruised cheek. "You have quite an arm." I felt my face burn with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry," I stammered. I didn't." No, it's my fault entirely," Harold insisted. "I should have called ahead, or at least turned on some lights." Mrs. Blackwood put an arm around my shoulders. "Come inside, dear. You're shaking like a leaf. Let's get you warmed up, and we'll sort this all out." As we walked back to the house, the police officer following behind, I couldn't help but laugh. All that terror, all that running, and it had been a simple misunderstanding. But later that night, as I lay in bed listening to the Blackwoods move about the house, a small part of me wondered, what if it hadn't been Harold? What if it had been a real intruder? I pulled the covers up higher, suddenly aware of just how big and empty the mansion was, and how many places there were for someone, or something, to hide. Sleep was a long time coming that night. The flickering fluorescent lights of the lobby cast long, dancing shadows across the worn carpet. It was another slow Tuesday night at the Grandview Hotel, the kind of night that made the silence feel heavy, almost expectant. I, Arthur Davies, the hotel manager, sat behind the antique front desk, the worn mahogany a familiar comfort under my hands. I was reviewing the week's occupancy reports, trying to lose myself in the mundane task. but a prickle of unease kept me on edge. It had been 3 weeks since the incident with room 1033. 3 weeks since the young woman, her eyes wide with a strange mixture of fear and determination, had demanded a room that didn't exist. 1033, she had insisted, her voice a strained whisper. I need room 1033. I had tried to explain, as gently as I could, that the Grandview only had 6 floors, that our room numbers stopped at 620. But she wouldn't listen. She just kept repeating the number, her gaze fixed on the elevator as if expecting it to magically transport her to a hidden floor. Eventually, I had managed to convince her to take room 312, the closest available to her non-existent request. She had taken the key with trembling hands, her eyes darting around the lobby as if searching for something unseen. That night, the nightmares began. It started with the phone calls. At 3:17 a.m., the front desk phone rang, the caller ID displaying a string of garbled numbers that vaguely resembled 1033. The voice on the other end was a distorted whisper, speaking in a language I didn't recognize, a chilling cacophony of guttural sounds and hissing sibilants. Then came the sightings. During my late-night rounds, I would catch glimpses of a door with the number 1033, etched in tarnished brass, appearing at the end of hallways, tucked away in shadowy corners, even once in the reflection of the lobby's grand mirror. Each time I tried to approach, it would vanish, leaving behind only the faint scent of mildew and decay. The hotel, once a place of comfort and familiarity, now felt like a labyrinth of shifting shadows and hidden corners. I started to doubt my own sanity, questioning the reality of what I was seeing and hearing. One night, driven by a desperate need for answers, I decided to confront the mystery head-on. Armed with a flashlight and a floor plan of the hotel, I embarked on a meticulous search, determined to find the elusive room 1033. I checked every floor, every hallway, every room. I even ventured into the dusty basement and the abandoned attic, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. But there was no trace of room 1033. Exhausted and disheartened, I returned to the lobby, sinking into the worn armchair behind the front desk. As I sat there, the silence of the hotel pressing in on me, I noticed something strange. The lobby, usually a grand and spacious area, felt smaller, the walls closing in. And then I saw it. At the far end of the lobby, where the grand staircase should have been, stood a door. A dark, imposing door with the number 1033 emblazoned in tarnished brass. My breath caught in my throat. This was it, the room that shouldn't exist. I approached the door cautiously, my footsteps echoing in the unnatural silence. As I drew closer, I felt a wave of cold air wash over me, and the hairs on my arms stood on end. I reached for the doorknob, my hand trembling. It was ice cold to the touch, and I felt a strange vibration emanating from it, like a low hum that resonated deep within my bones. I hesitated, fear battling with curiosity, but I had come too far to turn back now. I took a deep breath and turned the knob. The door swung open, revealing not a hotel room, but a swirling vortex of darkness, a void that seemed to suck the light and sound from the lobby. I recoiled, a wave of nausea washing over me. Then, from the depths of the darkness, I heard a voice, a whisper, soft and chilling, that seemed to slither into my mind. "Welcome," it said, "to room 1033. I slammed the door shut, my heart pounding in my chest. I stumbled back, my eyes fixed on the spot where the door had been. But it was gone, vanished without a trace. The lobby was back to normal, the grand staircase in its rightful place. But the memory of the door, the voice, the swirling darkness, remained, burned into my mind. I never saw the door again, nor did I receive any more calls from the mysterious number. But the incident left an indelible mark on me, a chilling reminder that there are things in this world that defy explanation, things that lurk just beyond the veil of our understanding. To this day, every time I walk through the lobby of the Grandview Hotel, I can't help but glance at the spot where the door appeared, a shiver running down my spine as I remember the chilling whisper that echoed from the darkness. "Welcome to room 1033. The silence that followed the slamming door was deafening. I stood frozen, my hand still hovering in the air where the doorknob had been just moments before. The lobby, bathed in the pale glow of the moon filtering through the arched windows, seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. The grand staircase remained in its place. The familiar ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner resumed its steady rhythm, and the unsettling chill that had permeated the air dissipated like smoke. It was as if the door, the voice, the swirling darkness had never been. Yet, I knew what I had seen. I knew what I had heard. And I knew that the Grandview Hotel held secrets that ran deeper than its foundations. The following days were a blur of apprehension and hypervigilance. Every creak in the old building, every flicker of the lights, every unexpected sound sent my heart racing. I found myself constantly scanning the hallways, searching for any sign of the elusive door, dreading the moment it might reappear. Sleep became a luxury I could barely afford. When I did manage to drift off, I was plagued by nightmares of endless corridors, shifting walls, and that chilling voice beckoning me towards the abyss. I tried to confide in my staff, to share the burden of this unsettling secret, but my words were met with skepticism and concern. They saw the strain in my eyes, the tremor in my hands, and attributed it to stress and overwork. Even Mrs. Henderson, the stern but kind housekeeper who had worked at the Grandview for over 3 decades, dismissed my concerns with a gentle pat on the shoulder and a reassuring, "It's just an old building, Mr. Davies. It has its quirks." But I knew it was more than just quirks. The Grandview was alive, in a way that defied logic and reason. It was as if the building itself was aware of my presence, toying with me, testing my resolve. One evening, as I was closing up the front desk for the night, I noticed a faint glow emanating from the manager's office. The door, usually ajar, was now firmly shut, and the brass nameplate that usually bore my name was blank. My heart pounded in my chest. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the door was back. I approached cautiously, my hand hovering over the doorknob. I could feel the familiar cold radiating from it, the faint vibration that seemed to pulse with an unseen energy. This time, I didn't hesitate. I turned the knob and pushed the door open. The office was empty. The desk was bare, the shelves devoid of books, the walls stripped of their usual framed prints. The only light came from the moon casting long, eerie shadows across the floor. And then I saw it. In the far corner, partially hidden by the shadows, stood a figure. It was tall and gaunt, its form shrouded in darkness, its face obscured. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The figure remained motionless, its presence filling the room with an oppressive weight. Then, it spoke. "You seek answers," the voice rasped, a chilling echo of the whisper I had heard from beyond the door. "But are you prepared for the truth?" I tried to speak, but my voice failed me. Fear had gripped me, paralyzing me in its icy grasp. The figure stepped forward, emerging from the shadows. It was a man, his face pale and drawn, his eyes hollow and dark. He wore a tattered uniform, the remnants of a name tag barely visible on his chest: Elias Thorne. My mind reeled. Elias Thorne, the hotel's original owner, who had mysteriously disappeared decades ago. "The Grandview remembers," Thorne said, his voice a chilling whisper. "It remembers all those who have passed through its doors, all those who have sought refuge within its walls, and it holds them captive." He gestured towards the empty space behind him. "Room 1033 is not a place," he explained, his voice filled with a chilling sadness. "It is a state of being, a prison for lost souls." He turned to me, his eyes boring into mine. "You have seen the door," he said. "You have heard the whispers. Now, you must choose. Will you join them, or will you find a way to break the curse?" The weight of his words, the chilling truth they revealed, crashed over me like a tidal wave. I was no longer just a hotel manager. I was a guardian, a keeper of secrets, a protector of souls. And I knew, with a certainty that burned within me, that I would not rest until I had freed the Grandview from its ghostly grip. The revelation of Elias Thorne's presence, his chilling confession about the nature of room 1033, and the weight of the responsibility thrust upon me sent my mind reeling. I stood there, in the eerie silence of my own office, facing the ghost of the hotel's past, a man trapped between worlds, a prisoner of his own creation. How? I finally managed to croak, my voice hoarse with fear and disbelief. How can I break the curse? Thorne's spectral form wavered in the dim light, his hollow eyes filled with a profound sadness. The Grandview feeds on fear, he explained, his voice a mournful whisper. It thrives on the anxieties and regrets of those who dwell within its walls. To break the curse, you must sever that connection. You must face your own fears and help others confront theirs. He reached out a translucent hand, his touch sending a shiver down my spine. The key lies within the stories, he said. The stories of those trapped within room 1033. Uncover their secrets, understand their pain, and help them find peace. With that, he faded away, leaving me alone in the unsettling silence of the empty office. The encounter left me shaken, but also strangely empowered. I had a purpose now, a mission to fulfill. I would unravel the mysteries of the Grandview, confront my own fears, and help those trapped within room 1033 find release. The next morning, I began my investigation. I delved into the hotel's archives, poring over old guest registers, dusty ledgers, and forgotten newspaper clippings. I interviewed longtime staff members, piecing together fragments of stories, whispers of strange occurrences, and rumors of unexplained disappearances. Gradually, a pattern emerged. The guests who vanished, the ones who became trapped in room 1033, all shared a common thread. They carried with them a heavy burden of guilt, regret, or unresolved trauma. The Grandview, it seemed, preyed on those who were already lost, those who sought solace within its walls but found only a deeper despair. Armed with this knowledge, I started to pay closer attention to the hotel's guests. I observed their demeanor, listened to their conversations, and sought out those who seemed burdened by unseen weights. One such guest was Mr. Caldwell, an elderly gentleman who arrived with a haunted look in his eyes and a tremor in his hands. He kept to himself, spending his days staring out the window of his room, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. One evening, I found him in the lobby, his face etched with despair. He confessed that he was haunted by the memory of a tragic accident that had claimed the life of his wife years ago. He blamed himself, and the guilt had consumed him, isolating him from the world. I listened patiently, offering words of comfort and understanding. I shared my own experiences with the Grandview, revealing the secret of room 1033 and the trapped souls within. Mr. Caldwell was initially skeptical, but as I recounted the stories of other guests, their struggles, their regrets, he began to see a glimmer of hope. He realized that he was not alone, that his pain was shared by others, and that perhaps, together, they could find a way to heal. Over the next few days, I spent hours talking with Mr. Caldwell, helping him confront his guilt and find a measure of peace. I encouraged him to connect with his family, to share his burden, and to seek forgiveness. And then, one morning, Mr. Caldwell was gone. His room was empty, his belongings gone. I checked the guest register, but there was no record of his departure. A wave of fear washed over me. Had he succumbed to the Grandview's allure? Had he become another victim of room 1033? But then, as I was reviewing the security footage, I noticed something remarkable. In the grainy images, I saw Mr. Caldwell walking towards the elevator, a faint smile on his face. And beside him, barely visible in the dim light, walked a translucent figure, its hand resting gently on Mr. Caldwell's shoulder. It was Elias Thorne. I realized then that Mr. Caldwell had not been taken by the Grandview. He had been freed. He had confronted his fears, found peace, and moved on. And I knew, with a renewed sense of purpose, that I was on the right path. I would continue to help the Grandview's guests, to guide them towards healing and release. And one day, I would break the curse, free Elias Thorne and all the lost souls trapped within room 1033, and restore the Grandview to its former glory. The Grandview, once a place of unsettling mystery, now felt like a battlefield. I was no longer just a manager, but a soldier in a silent war against unseen forces, a protector of vulnerable souls caught in the hotel's ghostly web. The encounter with Elias Thorne had ignited a fire within me, a determination to unravel the Grandview's secrets and break the curse that held him and countless others captive. My days were spent meticulously researching the hotel's history, scouring old newspapers, interviewing former employees, and even consulting local historians. I unearthed tales of tragic accidents, heartbroken lovers, and desperate souls seeking refuge within the Grandview's walls, only to disappear without a trace. Each story added another piece to the puzzle, painting a picture of a building steeped in sorrow and regret, a place where the veil between the living and the dead was thin and permeable. My nights were dedicated to observing the guests, searching for signs of vulnerability, for those who carried the weight of unspoken burdens. I became a silent confidant, a listener in the shadows, offering a sympathetic ear and a safe space for those grappling with their inner demons. There was the young woman who arrived with a suitcase full of secrets, her eyes haunted by a past she couldn't escape. The businessman who carried the guilt of a broken promise, his smile a mask for the turmoil within. And the elderly couple, their faces etched with the pain of a lost child, their silence speaking volumes of their unspoken grief. I approached each of them with caution, offering a kind word, a shared story, a gentle nudge towards confronting their fears. Some were receptive, opening up about their struggles, finding solace in the shared vulnerability. Others remained guarded, their secrets locked away, their pain a silent burden. But even those who resisted my attempts at connection, I watched over them, a silent guardian against the Grandview's insidious grasp. I patrolled the hallways, my senses heightened, alert for any sign of the spectral door with its ominous number. And whenever the phone rang in the dead of night, my heart would pound with a mixture of dread and anticipation, wondering if it was another lost soul reaching out from the abyss. One night, as I was making my rounds, I noticed a light flickering under the door of room 512. It was occupied by a young artist named Emily, who had arrived a week earlier, her eyes filled with a creative fire that seemed to flicker with a fragile intensity. I knocked gently, and when there was no response, I used my master key to enter. The room was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of paint and turpentine. Emily sat slumped over her easel, her brush frozen mid-stroke, her face pale and drawn. "Emily?" I asked softly, concerned by her appearance. She looked up, her eyes wide and unfocused. "He's here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "He's come back for me." "Who?" I asked gently, sensing a story waiting to be told. Tears welled up in her eyes as she recounted a tale of a controlling mentor, a man who had nurtured her talent but also stifled her spirit, leaving her trapped in a cycle of self-doubt and fear. He had passed away recently, but his presence lingered, a suffocating weight that threatened to extinguish her creative spark. I listened patiently, offering words of encouragement and support. I spoke of the Grandview's power to amplify fears and regrets, and of the trapped souls within room 1033, their stories echoing through the hotel's corridors. As I spoke, I noticed a change in Emily's demeanor. Her eyes regained their focus, her shoulders straightened, and a spark of defiance ignited within her. "I won't let him win," she declared, her voice gaining strength. "I won't let him silence my voice." That night, I stayed up late, watching over Emily's room. I heard the sounds of her brushstrokes, the rhythmic movement a testament to her renewed determination. And as the first rays of dawn painted the sky, I saw her emerge from her room, her face radiant with a newfound confidence. She thanked me for my support, her eyes filled with gratitude. And as she walked away, I felt a surge of hope. I had helped another soul find their way, another captive break free from the Grandview's grasp. The battle was far from over, but I knew, with a growing certainty, that I was making a difference. The Grandview, with its haunted history and its spectral door, was no longer just a place of fear and mystery. It was a proving ground, a crucible where souls could confront their demons and emerge stronger, their stories woven into the fabric of the hotel's ever-evolving narrative. Word of my unusual approach to hospitality, of my willingness to listen and to help guests confront their inner demons, began to spread. The Grandview, once known for its haunted reputation and unsettling occurrences, started to attract a different kind of clientele. People burdened by grief, guilt, and regret sought refuge within its walls, drawn by the promise of understanding and healing. I became a beacon of hope in the hotel's shadowy corridors, a guide for those navigating the labyrinth of their own minds. I organized small gatherings in the dimly lit library where guests could share their stories, offer support, and find solace in the shared vulnerability. I encouraged creative expression, transforming the once empty ballroom into a space for art therapy, where emotions could be poured onto canvases and sculpted into clay. The Grandview was undergoing a transformation, evolving from a place of fear and isolation into a sanctuary for healing and self-discovery. The air, once heavy with dread, now vibrated with a sense of shared purpose and resilience. Even the staff, initially skeptical of my methods, began to embrace the change. Mrs. Henderson, the ever-practical housekeeper, started leaving inspirational quotes on the pillows of troubled guests. Mr. Finch, the gruff bartender, became a master of mixing comforting cocktails and lending a sympathetic ear. And even the timid night bellhop, young Timmy, found his voice, offering words of encouragement to those arriving with heavy hearts. But amidst this newfound sense of hope, the mystery of room 1033 remained. The spectral door continued to appear at random intervals, a chilling reminder of the unseen forces at play. And Elias Thorne, the hotel's spectral guardian, would occasionally materialize in the shadows, his presence a constant reminder of the unfinished task. One stormy evening, as the wind howled through the eaves and rain lashed against the windows, a new guest arrived. He was a young man, his face pale and drawn, his eyes filled with a desperate sadness. He introduced himself as Daniel, and as he spoke, I recognized the familiar signs of a soul in torment. Daniel had lost his younger brother in a tragic accident, and the guilt had consumed him, isolating him from his family and friends. He had come to the Grandview seeking solace, but I feared he was walking into a trap. I invited him to join one of the evening gatherings in the library. He hesitated at first, but eventually agreed, drawn by the promise of shared experiences and understanding. As Daniel listened to the stories of other guests, their struggles, their triumphs, a glimmer of hope flickered in his eyes. He began to open up, sharing his own pain, his voice trembling with suppressed grief. And then, as he spoke, the lights flickered, and a cold gust of wind swept through the room. The spectral door materialized at the far end of the library, its brass number plate gleaming ominously in the dim light. A collective gasp filled the room. Fear gripped the guests, their eyes wide with terror. But Daniel, his gaze fixed on the door, stood up. He took a deep breath, and with a newfound courage, he walked towards it. "I'm not afraid anymore," he declared, his voice ringing with determination. "I'm going to face my grief, and I'm going to find my brother." He reached for the doorknob, his hand steady, and as he turned it, the door swung open, revealing not a swirling vortex of darkness, but a brightly lit room, filled with warmth and laughter. Standing in the doorway, his arms outstretched, was a young boy, his face beaming with joy. "Daniel," he cried, "you came." Daniel's face lit up with recognition. He rushed towards his brother, tears streaming down his face. And as they embraced, the spectral door vanished, leaving behind only a sense of peace and closure. The guests erupted in applause, their hearts filled with hope. They had witnessed a miracle, a testament to the power of facing one's fears and finding redemption. And as I watched Daniel and his brother disappear down the hallway, hand in hand, I knew that the Grandview was finally fulfilling its true purpose. It was no longer a haunted hotel, but a beacon of hope, a place where lost souls could find solace, healing, and a way back to the light. The Grandview was no longer a place of shadows and whispers. It had become a beacon of hope, a refuge for those seeking solace and healing. The stories of its guests, once etched in sadness and regret, were now interwoven with threads of resilience and redemption. News of the hotel's transformation spread, attracting not only those burdened by personal struggles, but also those curious about the enigmatic room 1033. Researchers, paranormal investigators, and even spiritual seekers flocked to the Grandview, hoping to catch a glimpse of the spectral door or perhaps even encounter Elias Thorne himself. I welcomed them all, sharing the hotel's history, its transformation, and the lessons I had learned about confronting fear and embracing vulnerability. The Grandview became a hub for discussions about the human condition, the nature of consciousness, and the mysteries that lie beyond our understanding. But even as the hotel thrived, a part of me remained restless. The curse of room 1033, though weakened, still lingered. Elias Thorne, despite his benevolent presence, was still bound to the Grandview, his soul unable to find true peace. I knew that the final chapter of this story had yet to be written. One day, a renowned psychic medium arrived at the Grandview. She had heard tales of the hotel's transformation and was drawn by the energy of healing and hope that now permeated its walls. She requested a room for a week, explaining that she needed time to connect with the spirits that resided within. Intrigued, I offered her the room next to my own, hoping to learn from her insights and perhaps gain a new perspective on the Grandview's mysteries. Over the next few days, I observed the medium as she moved through the hotel, her senses attuned to the unseen world. She would pause in hallways, her eyes closed, as if listening to whispers carried on the breeze. She would spend hours in the library, her fingers tracing the spines of ancient books, as if absorbing the stories they held. One evening, she approached me, her face etched with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Mr. Davies," she said, "I believe I have found a way to break the curse of room 1033. My heart leaped with hope. "How?" I asked eagerly. "The Grandview is a vessel," she explained, "a conduit for the energies of those who have passed through its doors. The trapped souls within room 1033 are bound by their unresolved emotions, their lingering attachments to the physical world." She continued, "To release them, we need to create a channel for those emotions to flow, a pathway for them to transcend their earthly bonds." The medium proposed a ritual, a gathering of the hotel's guests and staff, where they would collectively focus their intentions on releasing the trapped souls, offering them love, forgiveness, and a peaceful passage to the other side. I agreed without hesitation, eager to finally break the curse and free Elias Thorne from his spectral prison. The following night, the Grandview's grand ballroom was transformed into a sacred space. Candles flickered, casting a warm glow on the faces of the gathered guests and staff. The medium, standing at the center of the room, guided everyone through a meditation, their voices joining in a harmonious chant that resonated through the hotel's corridors. As the energy in the room intensified, I felt a shift in the atmosphere. The air crackled with an unseen power, and a sense of anticipation hung heavy in the air. And then, it happened. The spectral door materialized at the far end of the ballroom, its brass number plate glowing with an otherworldly light. But this time, it was not a menacing presence, but an invitation. The medium, her eyes closed, stepped towards the door. "It is time," she whispered. She reached for the doorknob, and as she turned it, the door swung open, revealing not a swirling vortex of darkness, but a radiant light that filled the room. From within the light, I heard a chorus of voices, whispers of gratitude and release. And then, one by one, The trapped souls emerged, their forms bathed in a gentle luminescence. Among them was Elias Thorne, his face no longer etched with sadness, but filled with a serene peace. He smiled at me, a gesture of gratitude and farewell. "Thank you," he whispered. "You have set us free." And with that, he and the other souls ascended into the light, their forms dissolving into the radiant glow. The spectral door vanished, and the ballroom was filled with a profound silence. Tears streamed down the faces of the guests, their hearts overflowing with a mixture of joy and sorrow. The curse of room 1033 was broken. The grand view was finally free. As I stood there, amidst the lingering glow of the departed souls, I felt a sense of profound peace. The hotel, once a place of fear and mystery, was now a sanctuary of healing and transformation, and I, its humble guardian, had played a part in its redemption. The Grandview's story, however, was far from over. It would continue to welcome guests, to offer solace and support, and to witness the unfolding of countless human stories within its walls. But it would do so with a renewed sense of purpose, its legacy forever intertwined with the triumph of hope over fear, and the enduring power of the human spirit to heal and transcend. The insistent buzzing of my phone dragged me from a restless sleep. 3 a.m. I lay sprawled on the living room couch, the silence of the pre-dawn hours pressing down on me. My mind, a whirlwind of unanswered questions and half-formed theories, refused to quiet. As a journalist, I thrived on uncovering the hidden, the obscured, the forgotten. I chased stories that others dismissed, digging for truth in the dusty corners of history. But tonight, the story had found me. The number flashing on my phone was unfamiliar, the digits too few, the format alien. A knot of unease tightened in my chest. "Do you see me?" the text read, followed by an image attachment. It was the old Victorian mansion on Elm Street, a place steeped in local lore and rumored hauntings. I'd been investigating its history for a potential feature article, but this photo, something was wrong. The angles were skewed, the lines distorted, as if the house itself were writhing in discomfort. All the windows were dark except one on the second floor, where a tall, unmoving figure stood silhouetted against the dim light. A shiver ran down my spine, and I fumbled to block the number, my hands trembling. Sleep was impossible now. I tossed and turned until dawn. The image of the warped house and the shadowy figure burned into my mind. Morning brought little relief. At the newspaper office, the usual bustle felt distant and muted. I tried to lose myself in researching local archives, hoping to find some rational explanation for the unsettling text. The number, I discovered, belonged to a long-defunct photography studio that had operated in the late 1800s. The studio had vanished without a trace, its owner disappearing under mysterious circumstances. My unease grew with each passing hour. I decided to visit the Victorian mansion, hoping to find something, anything, that would explain the strange photo. The house, bathed in the afternoon sunlight, seemed normal enough, its peeling paint and overgrown gardens hinting at its age, but nothing more sinister. Yet, as I stepped inside, a sense of foreboding washed over me. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and dust motes danced in the shafts of light filtering through the grimy windows. I climbed the creaking stairs, my footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. The second floor was a warren of shadowy rooms, each holding the faint remnants of forgotten lives. In the room with the window facing the street, I paused, a sense of déjà vu washing over me. This was the window from the photo. I peered out at the quiet street below, trying to imagine the scene as it had been captured in that unsettling image. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed. The same number. "I'm still here," the text read, and with it, another photo. This time it was the interior of the mansion, the room where I stood, but the walls were curved and distorted. The furniture twisted into grotesque shapes, and in the corner, a shadowy figure, its form shifting and indistinct, seemed to be watching me. Panic clawed at my throat. I fled the house, the image of the spectral figure seared into my mind. Back at my apartment, I tried to rationalize what was happening. Was it an elaborate hoax? A prank by someone with a twisted sense of humor? But the photos, the feeling of being watched, it all felt too real. The texts continued, each one accompanied by a photo of a different historical location in town, each one warped and distorted, each one with a shadowy figure lurking in the background. The messages grew more menacing, demanding that I stop investigating the town's history, stop digging into the past. Fear warred with my journalistic instincts. I couldn't ignore the story, even if it terrified me. I delved deeper into the town's archives, searching for any connection between the haunted locations and the defunct photography studio. I uncovered whispers of a dark secret, a hidden history that some wanted to remain buried. The texts escalated, the photos becoming more personal, showing me in my apartment, on the street, always with the shadowy figure lurking nearby. I felt trapped, hunted, my every move scrutinized. I considered going to the police, but what evidence did I have? A series of strange texts and unsettling photos? They would think I was delusional. Then, one night, a text came that chilled me to the bone. "I know where you live," it read. The accompanying photo was of my apartment building, my window glowing in the darkness. And standing on the sidewalk below, clear as day, was the shadowy figure. Its face obscured, but its malevolent intent clear. I was no longer just a journalist chasing a story. I was a target. Sleep became a luxury I could barely afford. Every creak in my old apartment building, every rustle of leaves outside my window, sent my heart racing. I felt constantly on edge, my senses hyper-alert, my mind a battlefield of fear and determination. I refused to be driven from my home, from my city, by this unseen menace. I doubled down on my research, poring over old newspapers, city records, even dusty historical society archives. I learned that the photography studio owner, a man named Elias Thorne, had been obsessed with capturing the soul of the city's historic buildings. He believed that these structures held the lingering essence of those who had lived and died within their walls. His photographs, though technically brilliant, were often unsettling, capturing strange distortions and shadowy figures that others dismissed as flaws or tricks of the light. Thorne's obsession grew darker, his photographs more disturbing. Rumors spread of his eccentric behavior, his reclusiveness, his fascination with the macabre. Then, he vanished. His studio was abandoned, his photographs left to gather dust. Some whispered that he had gone mad, driven to suicide by the very spirits he sought to capture. Others believed he had stumbled upon something too terrible to share, something that had consumed him. I started to see a pattern in the locations featured in the threatening texts. They were all places that Thorne had photographed, places where his unsettling images had captured those same shadowy figures. Was it possible that Thorne, in his pursuit of the city's soul, had somehow unleashed something malevolent, something that now haunted these places? And was I, by continuing his work, by bringing these places back into the light, somehow feeding this entity, giving it power? The thought chilled me. Was I not just a target, but a catalyst? Was I unwittingly contributing to the very danger I was trying to understand? The next text arrived as I was leaving the library, my arms laden with books on local history and paranormal phenomena. "You're playing a dangerous game," it warned. The accompanying photo was of the library itself, its facade twisted into a grotesque grin, the shadowy figure standing in the doorway, watching me leave. I felt a surge of defiance. This entity, whatever it was, wanted me to cower, to retreat into fear. But I wouldn't let it win. I would uncover the truth, expose the darkness, and banish it back to the shadows where it belonged. That night, I made a decision. I would confront the entity on its own terms. I would go to the abandoned photography studio, the place where it all began. Perhaps there, among Thorne's forgotten belongings, I would find the key to understanding this haunting, to ending it. The studio was located in a derelict part of town, a crumbling building hidden in a maze of narrow alleyways. I arrived after nightfall, the only light coming from the moon hanging low in the sky. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. I pushed open the creaking door, my heart pounding in my chest. The interior was a time capsule, frozen in the moment of Thorn's disappearance. Dust lay thick on every surface, cobwebs hung like shrouds from the ceiling. The scent of chemicals and old paper hung heavy in the air. I moved cautiously through the space, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. In the darkroom, I found stacks of old photographs, many of them warped and faded, their images barely discernible. But some were startlingly clear, capturing the same distorted reality, the same shadowy figures that I had seen in the texts. As I examined the photos, I noticed a recurring symbol, a strange glyph that appeared in the background of many of the images. It was a simple design, a circle with a line through it, but it seemed to radiate an unsettling energy. I had seen this symbol before, carved into the stonework of some of the haunted locations. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. I jumped, my heart leaping into my throat. The text was short, chillingly simple, "Found you." The accompanying photo was of the studio interior, the room where I stood, the shadowy figure looming behind me. I whirled around, my flashlight beam dancing wildly in the darkness. But there was nothing there, only the dust motes swirling in the stale air, and the echo of my own panicked breathing. Then I heard it, a soft whisper, close to my ear, sending a shiver down my spine. "You can't escape the past." The whisper, though faint, seemed to reverberate through the room, chilling me to the bone. I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, but there was nothing there, just the oppressive silence and the lingering scent of dust and decay. My heart hammered against my ribs, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I felt a prickling sensation on my skin, as if unseen eyes were watching me. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end. I knew I had to get out of there. I backed away slowly, my eyes darting around the room, searching for the source of the voice, for any sign of the shadowy figure. But there was nothing. I stumbled out of the studio and into the alleyway, the cool night air a welcome relief. I didn't stop running until I reached the main street, the familiar sounds of traffic and distant music grounding me in reality. But even as I tried to calm myself, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed, that the entity was still with me, watching my every move. Back in my apartment, I locked the door and bolted the windows, as if that could keep out the unseen menace. I tried to distract myself with work, with the mundane tasks of daily life, but the fear lingered, a constant knot in my stomach. The text continued, each one a reminder that I was being watched, that I couldn't escape. The photos grew more disturbing, the shadowy figure becoming more distinct, its features slowly emerging from the darkness. It was a man, tall and gaunt, with hollow eyes and a chillingly familiar smile. I recognized that smile. It was Elias Thorne, the long-dead photographer. The realization sent a shiver down my spine. Was Thorne's spirit somehow trapped in these photos, in these haunted locations? Was he the one tormenting me, trying to prevent me from uncovering the truth about his disappearance? Or was there something else at play, something even more sinister, using Thorne's image as a mask? I delved deeper into Thorne's history, searching for any clues to his fate, any explanation for the haunting. I discovered that he had been experimenting with a new photographic process, one that he believed could capture the very essence of a person's soul. He had even built a special camera, a contraption of brass and lenses that looked more like an alchemical device than a photographic tool. Could this camera be the key to the mystery? Had Thorne, in his quest to capture the soul, inadvertently opened a portal to another realm, unleashing the entity that now haunted these places? I knew I had to find that camera. It was the only way to understand what was happening, to stop the haunting, to free myself from this nightmare. The next text arrived as I was preparing to leave for Thorne's old studio. "Don't go," it warned. You'll regret it. The accompanying photo was of the studio, the camera sitting on a tripod, its lens pointed directly at the door, and standing beside it, the shadowy figure of Elias Thorne, his smile a chilling promise of doom. I hesitated, fear battling with determination, but I couldn't turn back now. I had come too far, uncovered too much. I had to see this through to the end. I grabbed my keys and headed out the door, into the unknown. The old studio loomed before me, a dark silhouette against the twilight sky. A sense of foreboding washed over me, a premonition of danger that made my stomach churn. But I pushed the feeling aside, steeling myself for the confrontation ahead. I cautiously entered the studio, my flashlight beam cutting through the thick dust and shadows. The air was heavy with the scent of decay, and the silence was oppressive, broken only by the creaking of the floorboards beneath my feet. I made my way to the back room, where I had seen the camera and the photo. The room was in disarray, papers scattered across the floor, chemicals spilled on the workbench, as if Thorne had left in a hurry. And there it was, the camera, sitting on its tripod, its brass gleaming in the dim light. It was an imposing object, its intricate mechanisms and strange symbols hinting at its power. I approached the camera cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. As I drew closer, I felt a surge of energy, a tingling sensation that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. Suddenly, the camera's lens began to glow, a faint blue light emanating from its depths. I gasped, taking a step back, but it was too late. The room was flooded with light, a blinding flash that made me cry out and shield my eyes. When I could see again, the room was different. The walls were warped and distorted, the furniture twisted into grotesque shapes, and standing before me, as if materialized from the light itself, was the shadowy figure of Elias Thorne. He was no longer just a figure in a photograph, but a solid presence, his features etched in a chillingly lifelike detail. His eyes, hollow and dark, seemed to bore into my soul. "You shouldn't have come," he said, his voice a raspy whisper that echoed through the room. I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. Fear paralyzed me, my body frozen in place. Thorne stepped closer, his smile widening, revealing a set of teeth that were too sharp, too long. "You've interfered with things you don't understand," he said. "Now you will pay the price." He raised his hand, and I saw that he was holding a photograph, a picture of me, taken just moments before I entered the studio. But in the photo, my image was distorted, my features twisted into a grotesque mockery of myself. Thorne held the photo up to the camera's lens, and the blue light intensified, engulfing the image. I felt a strange pulling sensation, as if my very being was being drawn into the photograph. I screamed, struggling against the force, but it was no use. My vision blurred, my body began to dissolve, and then everything went black. When I regained consciousness, I was lying on the floor of the studio, the camera lying beside me, its lens shattered. The room was back to normal, the walls straight, the furniture in its place. Thorne was gone. I sat up, my head spinning, my body trembling. I had no idea what had happened, how I had escaped from the photograph. But I knew one thing. I had to destroy the camera. I grabbed the camera and smashed it against the floor, the brass and glass shattering into 1,000 pieces. As I did so, I felt a sense of release, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The haunting was over. I left the studio, the remnants of the camera left behind like the fragments of a nightmare. As I walked away, I glanced back at the building, its dark silhouette receding into the night. I knew that I would never forget the events of the past few weeks, the terror, the confusion, the encounter with Elias Thorne. But I also knew that I had faced my fears, uncovered the truth, and emerged stronger on the other side. The city, once a source of fear and uncertainty, now felt different. I saw it with new eyes, appreciating its history, its beauty, its resilience. And I knew that I would continue to tell its stories, to uncover its secrets, to give voice to the past. But I would also be more careful, more aware of the shadows that lurked beneath the surface, of the unseen forces that shaped our world. For I had learned that sometimes the past can reach out and touch us, reminding us that we are all connected, that our actions have consequences, and that the stories we tell can have a power far beyond our understanding. The flickering fluorescent lights of the archive cast long, dancing shadows across the rows of towering shelves. The air hung heavy with the scent of aged paper, and dust motes danced in the narrow beams of light that filtered through the grimy windows. I, Dr. Elias Finch, researcher and historian, sat hunched over a table in the dimly lit corner, my attention consumed by the contents of a weathered cardboard box. Inside, nestled amongst crumpled newspaper clippings and faded photographs, lay a collection of reel-to-reel tapes, their labels marked with cryptic symbols and dates that stretched back to the early 1960s. I had stumbled upon the box while conducting research for my upcoming book on the history of the Blackwood Sanatorium, a now-abandoned psychiatric institution that had once stood on the outskirts of town. Intrigued, I carefully extracted one of the tapes and threaded it onto the old reel-to-reel player I had brought with me. As the machine whirred to life, a voice emerged from the speakers, crackling with static and the weight of time. It was a man's voice, filled with a palpable anxiety, recounting a recurring dream about a shadowy figure lurking in the corners of his vision. He spoke of a feeling of being watched, of an unseen presence that whispered his name in the dead of night. A shiver ran down my spine. The man's words resonated with an unsettling familiarity, echoing a recurring nightmare that had plagued my own sleep for weeks. I listened intently, my curiosity piqued, my apprehension growing with each passing minute. The man on the tape, identified only as Patient 47, described his surroundings in vivid detail, mentioning a room with peeling wallpaper, a window overlooking a courtyard with a gnarled oak tree, and a persistent humming sound that seemed to emanate from the walls. My heart pounded in my chest. The room he described, the window, the humming sound, they all mirrored the details of my own apartment, down to the oddly patterned wallpaper and the ancient oak tree that stood just outside my bedroom window. A wave of dizziness washed over me. I reached for the stop button, needing a moment to process the unsettling coincidence. But as I did so, the tape player malfunctioned, the reels spinning uncontrollably, the voice of Patient 47 growing louder, more frantic. He spoke of a growing sense of dread, of a feeling that he was losing his grip on reality. He described a chilling encounter with a shadowy figure that materialized in his room, its face obscured by darkness, its voice a chilling whisper that promised oblivion. Panic clawed at my throat. I fumbled with the power switch, finally managing to silence the machine. But the man's words, his fear, his chilling premonition, lingered in the air, weaving a web of unease around me. I spent the rest of the day poring over the remaining tapes, each one filled with similar accounts of unsettling dreams, strange occurrences, and encounters with shadowy figures. The patient's stories, though unique in their details, shared a common thread of paranoia, fear, and a growing sense of detachment from reality. And with each new tape, I found more unsettling parallels to my own life. A woman spoke of a recurring dream about a library with endless shelves and a whispering voice that called her name. A man described a feeling of being trapped in a repeating loop, his days blending together in a monotonous blur. My apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. I found myself constantly checking the corners of my vision, listening for whispers in the silence, dreading the nightfall and the return of the unsettling dreams. Driven by a need for answers, I delved deeper into the history of the Blackwood Sanatorium. I uncovered reports of experimental treatments, unethical practices, and a string of unexplained deaths and disappearances. The more I learned, the more convinced I became that the tapes were not just the ramblings of troubled minds, but a chilling chronicle of something far more sinister. One evening, as I sat in my apartment, listening to the wind rustling through the leaves of the oak tree outside my window, I heard a knock at the door. My heart pounded in my chest. I wasn't expecting any visitors. I cautiously approached the door, peering through the peephole. There, standing in the dimly lit hallway, was a figure shrouded in shadow. I couldn't make out their face, but I recognized the outline of their form, the way they stood, the unsettling stillness of their posture. It was the figure from my dreams. A wave of terror washed over me. I stumbled back from the door, my breath catching in my throat. The knocking continued, more insistent now, echoing through the silence of my apartment. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed for the police. But as I pressed the call button, the knocking stopped. Silence descended once again, broken only by the pounding of my own heart. I crept back to the door, my eye pressed against the peephole. The hallway was empty, but as I turned away, I noticed something on the floor, a small cassette tape, its label marked with a single word, Finch. The tape felt cold in my trembling hand. Finch, my own name, scrawled in a handwriting I didn't recognize, sent a shiver down my spine. It was a chilling confirmation that this was no mere coincidence, that I was somehow connected to these tapes, to these patients, to the Blackwood Sanatorium and its dark secrets. Fear warred with curiosity. A part of me wanted to throw the tape away, to pretend I had never found it, to try and reclaim the normalcy of my life. But another part, the researcher in me, the part that craved answers and sought the truth, urged me to listen. I hesitated for a moment, then, with a deep breath and a pounding heart, I loaded the tape onto the player. The familiar hiss of static filled the room, followed by a voice. But it wasn't the voice of a stranger. It was my voice, my own voice, filled with a weariness I didn't recognize, spoke of anxieties, of unsettling dreams, of a feeling of being watched. It described my apartment, my work, my daily routines, with an eerie accuracy that made my blood run cold. I listened in stunned silence, my mind reeling. It was me, yet it wasn't. The voice was mine, but the words, the emotions, the experiences, they belonged to someone else, someone who shared my life, my thoughts, my very identity. As the tape played on, the voice grew more agitated, more desperate. It spoke of a growing sense of paranoia, of a fear that the walls were closing in, that reality itself was crumbling. And then, in a chilling whisper, it uttered a phrase that sent a shiver down my spine. I can't escape. The tape ended abruptly, leaving me in a stunned silence. My own voice, echoing from the past, had painted a chilling portrait of a descent into madness, a descent that mirrored my own growing anxieties. I sat there for a long time, the silence broken only by the hum of the reel-to-reel player. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I had just heard. Was this some elaborate prank? A cruel hoax designed to drive me insane? Or was it something far more sinister? A glimpse into a reality I couldn't comprehend? Driven by a desperate need for answers, I returned to the Blackwood Sanatorium. I explored its abandoned corridors, my footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. I searched for clues, for any connection between myself and the patients whose voices I had heard on the tapes. In the sanatorium's archives, I stumbled upon a file labeled Project Echo. It contained documents detailing a series of experiments conducted in the 1960s, experiments that aimed to explore the nature of consciousness and the possibility of transferring memories and experiences between individuals. The documents were fragmented, incomplete, but they painted a chilling picture of a project gone wrong, of patients subjected to unethical procedures, their minds manipulated, their identities shattered. And then, I found it. A photograph, tucked away in the back of the file. It showed a young man, his face strikingly similar to my own, strapped to a chair, electrodes attached to his head, his eyes filled with a haunting fear. Beneath the photograph, a caption read, Subject E. Finch, Project Echo. The realization hit me like a thunderbolt. I was not just connected to the patients on the tapes. I was one of them. My life, my memories, my very identity were not my own. They were echoes of another life, another time, another consciousness, imprinted onto my mind through some twisted experiment. The weight of this revelation crushed me. I was a copy, a shadow, a ghost inhabiting a life that wasn't truly mine. But as I grappled with this devastating truth, a new resolve emerged within me. I would not be defined by the experiments of the past. I would reclaim my identity, my life, my future. I returned to the archive, determined to uncover the full extent of Project Echo, to understand its purpose, its methods, its consequences. I would expose the truth, no matter the cost. And as I delved deeper into the sanatorium's dark secrets, I knew that I was not just fighting for my own sanity, but for the memories and identities of all those who had been trapped within the echoes of the past. The archive became my sanctuary, a refuge from the encroaching madness that threatened to consume me. I spent countless hours poring over dusty files, deciphering cryptic notes, and piecing together the fragmented history of Project Echo. The more I learned, the more horrified I became. The experiments conducted at Blackwood were not just unethical, they were monstrous. Patients were subjected to sensory deprivation, hypnotic suggestion, and even surgical procedures, all in the name of unlocking the secrets of the human mind. But the researchers had stumbled upon something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. They had inadvertently opened a doorway to a realm beyond our understanding, a realm where consciousness could be manipulated, transferred, and even replicated. Project Echo, it seemed, was not just about understanding the mind. It was about controlling it, about creating copies, echoes of individuals, stripped of their autonomy and forced to relive the experiences of others. I discovered records of patients whose memories had been wiped clean, replaced with the experiences of strangers. I read accounts of individuals driven to madness by the constant influx of foreign thoughts and emotions. And I found evidence of a chilling plan to use this technology to create a workforce of compliant, programmable individuals. The implications were terrifying. If the researchers at Blackwood had succeeded, the very nature of identity, of individuality, could be shattered. But Project Echo had ultimately failed. The experiments had proven too dangerous, too unpredictable. The patients had rebelled, the sanatorium had descended into chaos, and the project had been abandoned, its secrets buried in the archives. But the echoes remained. I realized that I was not the only one. There were others out there, like me, living with the remnants of Project Echo, their minds haunted by the ghosts of other lives. I felt a surge of empathy for these unknown individuals, a shared sense of violation and a burning desire to expose the truth. I would not let the Blackwood Sanatorium and its dark legacy remain hidden any longer. I began to compile my findings, documenting the experiments, the victims, the cover-ups. I reached out to journalists, researchers, and even government agencies, hoping to bring the story of Project Echo to light. But my efforts were met with resistance. The Blackwood Sanatorium was a powerful institution, its influence reaching far beyond its crumbling walls. Those who knew the truth were afraid to speak, silenced by threats and intimidation. I felt isolated, alone in my fight against a shadowy force that seemed determined to keep its secrets buried. But I refused to give up. I had a responsibility to those who had suffered, to those whose lives had been shattered by Project Echo. And then, one day, I received an unexpected message. It was from a woman named Sarah, who claimed to have been a patient at Blackwood during the time of the experiments. She had read my online posts about Project Echo and recognized her own experiences in my descriptions. Sarah had also been a subject of the memory transfer experiments. She had lived with the echoes of another life for years, struggling with fragmented memories and a fractured sense of self. But unlike me, Sarah had managed to retain some of her original identity. She remembered the experiments, the researchers, the fear, and she had information that could expose the truth. Together, Sarah and I formed an alliance, determined to bring the Blackwood Sanatorium and its dark secrets to justice. We gathered evidence, contacted other victims, and built a case that could not be ignored. Our efforts eventually paid off. The story of Project Echo broke, sending shockwaves through the scientific community and the public at large. Investigations were launched, lawsuits were filed, and the Blackwood Sanatorium was finally exposed for the horrors it had perpetrated. But the fight was not over. The echoes of Project Echo still lingered, haunting the minds of those who had been subjected to its experiments. And I knew that my own journey was far from finished. I had uncovered the truth about my past, but I still had to reconcile with the echoes that resided within me. I had to learn to live with the fragmented memories, the foreign emotions, the lingering sense of not fully belonging. But I was no longer alone. I had Sarah and others like us who understood the struggle, who shared the burden. And together, we would find a way to heal, to reclaim our identities, and to ensure that the horrors of Project Echo were never repeated. The tapes, once a source of fear and confusion, now served as a reminder of my resilience, my determination, and my connection to others who shared my unique experience. They were a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to overcome adversity, to find meaning in the face of trauma, and to forge a new path forward, even in the shadow of the past. The neon lights of the bar cast an ethereal glow on her auburn hair, making her smile even more radiant. Sharon. The name echoed in my mind all the way home. She was beautiful in that classic way that made heads turn. It was a beauty that emanated from her confident aura, her laughing blue eyes, and her cascading curls. We met by chance one evening. I, a software engineer fresh out of a breakup, wandered into my usual bar to drown my sorrows. She, a talented interior designer, was there celebrating a new project with a group of friends. Our eyes met across the crowded room, and from there, it was like a dream. Sharon was intelligent, witty, and possessed a sharp sense of humor. She knew how to make a joke, how to make me laugh, and most importantly, how to listen. We talked about everything under the sun, from lofty philosophical ideas to mundane everyday occurrences. Time flew by, and soon, the bar was almost empty. "Would you like to go for a walk?" Sharon asked, her voice soft as a whisper. I nodded, feeling like I had stumbled upon a hidden treasure. We walked along the riverbank, watching the city lights twinkle to life. The moonlight painted the water gold, creating a breathtakingly romantic scene. "I have a confession to make," Sharon suddenly said, breaking the silence. "What's that?" I asked, intrigued. "I'm not the easiest person to sleep next to." She chuckled, her tone half joking, half serious. I laughed, thinking she was pulling my leg. "Don't worry, I've shared a bed with snorers before. I think I can handle it." Sharon shook her head, a playful smile dancing on her lips. "It's not just snoring. I talk in my sleep. Sometimes I toss and turn, well, I've even been known to slap people by accident." "Slap people, huh? Sounds like an occupational hazard," I teased. She gave me a look, half serious, half amused. "I'm just saying it's happened before. If you decide to stick around, consider yourself warned." At the time, I didn't think much of it. It seemed harmless, even endearing. But looking back, yeah, I should have taken her more seriously. The next few dates were perfect. Sharon was everything I had ever wanted in a woman. She was beautiful, intelligent, funny, and had a successful career. We shared common interests, similar life perspectives, and most importantly, we understood each other. After a few weeks of dating, I decided to move in with Sharon. Her apartment was located in the heart of the city, decorated in a modern, minimalist yet elegant style. I felt comfortable and happy by her side. However, Sharon's warnings started to come true. On the first night we slept together, I was half expecting a slap in my sleep, just so I could tease her about it the next morning. But that night, things were relatively uneventful. She tossed and turned a little, muttering gibberish like, "Not the red one," and "Don't let it fall." I barely noticed. But then, Sharon's sleep quirks started to become more pronounced. One night, I woke up with a start as her hand smacked me squarely in the chest. "What the hell?" I mumbled, groggy and confused. Sharon was still fast asleep, her arm falling limply back onto the bed. The next morning, I brought it up over breakfast. "So, you hit me last night." She nearly choked on her coffee, her eyes wide with mock horror. "I did. Yup. Full-on smack. Guess you were dreaming about fighting someone." She grinned, shaking her head. "Maybe I was dreaming about Aaron." Aaron was Sharon's ex-husband. She didn't talk about him much, but from what I gathered, their divorce had been messy. The way she said his name, half joking, half bitter, made me wonder if there was more to the story. Still, I laughed it off. At the time, it didn't seem like a big deal. But the warnings continued, in subtle ways that I failed to recognize for what they truly were. A few weeks after moving in, Sharon brought it up again one night as we were getting ready for bed. "I wasn't kidding about the sleep talking, she said. "I know," I replied, pulling the covers over us. "Honestly, it's not that bad. It's kind of adorable." Her smile faltered for a second. "Just don't freak out if I say something weird, okay?" I gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "Sharon, it's no trouble, really. I think you're perfect, and nothing you say in your sleep is going to change that." She smiled again, but this time it didn't quite reach her eyes. At the time, I thought it was nothing. Now, I wish I had taken that moment more seriously. The initial weeks of living with Sharon were a blur of domesticity and burgeoning love. We fell into a comfortable rhythm, navigating the shared space of her apartment with an ease that surprised me. Mornings were filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and shared laughter over breakfast. Evenings were spent curled up on the couch, lost in conversation or a good movie. But as the days turned into weeks, a creeping unease began to weave its way into my contentment. Sharon's sleep-talking, initially a source of amusement, started to take a darker turn. It began subtly. Instead of harmless phrases, she would utter disjointed sentences, fragments of conversations that made no sense. "The well is deep," she'd murmur one night, her voice eerily calm. Another time, it was, "He never saw it coming." I'd wake up with a jolt, heart pounding, the words echoing in the silence of the room. Sharon would be sleeping peacefully beside me, oblivious to the chilling pronouncements that had just escaped her lips. I tried to rationalize it. Stress, maybe? A vivid imagination? But the unsettling feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing night. One night, I woke to the sound of Sharon pacing around the room. Her movements were agitated, her whispers frantic. "It has to be tonight," she muttered, her voice laced with urgency. "No witnesses." Fear gripped me, cold and paralyzing. I lay perfectly still, pretending to be asleep, while my mind raced with terrifying possibilities. Who was she talking about? What was she planning? The next morning, I confronted her, my voice trembling slightly. "Sharon, you were talking in your sleep again last night." It was disturbing. She looked at me with genuine concern. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. It's just stress, Work has been crazy lately." I wanted to believe her. I desperately wanted to dismiss it as nothing more than an overactive imagination. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was growing rapidly. My anxiety intensified. I started researching sleep disorders, delving into the world of parasomnias and nocturnal terrors. Could Sharon be suffering from something more serious than just simple sleep talking? The more I read, the more uneasy I became. Cases of sleepwalking violence, though rare, were well documented. People had committed heinous acts while asleep, with no recollection of their actions upon waking. Was it possible? Could Sharon be one of those rare cases? The thought was terrifying, but I couldn't shake it. I started observing her more closely, looking for any signs, any clues that might confirm or alleviate my fears. One evening, as we were getting ready for bed, I noticed a small scratch on her arm. "How did you get that?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Sharon glanced at it nonchalantly. "Oh, I must have scratched myself in my sleep. I do that sometimes." My blood ran cold. A chilling image flashed through my mind. Sharon, eyes closed, sleepwalking, inflicting harm on someone or something. I had to know the truth. I had to find out what was happening when Sharon slept. That night, after she drifted off, I carefully placed my phone on the nightstand, the recorder app open. My heart pounded in my chest as I lay there, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing, waiting for the whispers to begin. And they did. "It's done," she murmured, her voice flat and emotionless. "He won't bother anyone anymore." A wave of nausea washed over me. I grabbed the phone, my hands shaking, and listened to the rest of the recording with a growing sense of horror. Sharon wasn't just sleep-talking. She was confessing to murder. The weight of Sharon's confession pressed down on me, a suffocating blanket of fear and disbelief. The woman I loved, the woman I shared my life with, was a murderer. The realization was like a punch to the gut, leaving me gasping for air in a world suddenly turned upside down. I couldn't stay in that apartment, not another night. I packed a bag, my movements frantic, my mind a whirlwind of terrifying thoughts. Where would I go? What would I do? Who could I tell? The police? The idea seemed ludicrous. Who would believe me? A beautiful, successful woman, a pillar of the community, whispering confessions of murder in her sleep? They'd think I was crazy, or worse, complicit. I left the apartment in the dead of night, the silence amplifying the pounding of my heart. I drove aimlessly, the city lights blurring into streaks of color as I grappled with the horrifying truth. Days turned into weeks. I lived in a cheap motel, a ghost haunting the fringes of society. Fear was my constant companion, a shadow that clung to me every waking moment. I jumped at every creak, every unexpected noise, convinced that Sharon was coming for me. Sleep offered no escape. Nightmares plagued me, vivid and terrifying. I'd see Sharon's face, twisted in a grotesque mockery of her usual beauty, her voice echoing the chilling confessions that haunted my waking hours. I tried to distract myself, to bury the truth under a mountain of mindless activities. I read, I watched TV, I went for long walks, but nothing could silence the whispers in my head, the chilling knowledge that a killer walked free. One day, while browsing the local news online, a headline caught my eye: "Local woman found dead in suspicious circumstances." My heart pounded as I clicked on the article. The victim was a young woman, found in a wooded area just outside the city. The details were sparse, but one sentence sent a shiver down my spine. Police are investigating the possibility of foul play. The location, the circumstances, it all felt eerily familiar. A terrifying thought took root in my mind. Could this be another one of Sharon's victims? Driven by a morbid curiosity and a growing sense of responsibility, I started following the news religiously, searching for any updates on the case. Each new detail, each cryptic comment from the police, fueled my suspicions. I had to do something. I couldn't let Sharon continue her killing spree. But what could I do? I was just one man, with no evidence, no proof, nothing but a collection of terrifying recordings and a gnawing sense of guilt. Then, one day, a breakthrough. The police released a sketch of a potential suspect based on witness accounts. It was a crude drawing, but the resemblance was undeniable. It was Sharon. A surge of adrenaline coursed through me. This was it. This was my chance to stop her. I contacted the police anonymously, leading them to the location Sharon had mentioned in her sleep-talking confessions. I told them about the recordings, the details only the killer could know. The investigation was swift and decisive. Sharon was arrested, the evidence against her overwhelming. The recordings, coupled with the physical evidence found at the crime scenes, painted a damning picture. The trial was a media circus. Sharon, once the picture of elegance and charm, now appeared haggard and defeated. She pleaded not guilty, claiming amnesia and sleepwalking as her defense. But the jury was unconvinced. The verdict was guilty. Sharon was sentenced to life in prison, her reign of terror finally brought to an end. The relief was overwhelming, but it was tinged with sadness and regret. I had loved Sharon, truly loved her. But love couldn't blind me to the truth, to the darkness that lurked beneath her beautiful facade. In the end, justice was served, but the scars remain, a reminder of the woman I loved and the monster she truly was. The whispers in the dark may have been silenced, but their echoes will forever haunt my memories. And so, the tale ends, leaving a lingering chill even as the rain outside begins to soften. But remember, every shadow holds a story, and every whisper on the wind might be a ghostly echo. If you enjoyed tonight's journey into the unknown, don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to the Rainy Night Storyteller for more tales of mystery and horror. Until next time, sleep well, and may your dreams be undisturbed.